Hey everyone, welcome back. My name is Piyush and I welcome you to the most exciting section of this whole course, that is design patterns. So from this video onwards, we'll be starting design patterns, and in this video, let's first understand what are design patterns. Like, what do you really mean by design patterns? So design patterns are typical solutions to commonly occurring problems in software design. For example, let's take an example here. Like if you want to build your house, correct? Sorry for my bad drawing. So let's say this is your house, correct? And you want to build your house. So like it's not like that you will just gather the raw material and start building your house, correct? What you will do is, first of all, you'll create a blueprint, you'll create a design office, and then you will basically, what you'll do, you will basically construct this house, right? Now to design this particular map, or I can say this design has some rules, correct? They have some specifications, some rules, right? And if you follow those rules, those specifications by the architect or something, then there are chances that there will be a high quality in the construction of your house. What if you're you don't have any blueprint, or you don't have any design pattern, I can say any pattern for your house? Then what will happen to your architecture? Obviously there are chances that you will mess up things during the construction. Similarly, when we design a code or maybe design a system, if we talk about system design and designing a system, we have some design patterns out there which we need to follow, or I can say which we should follow, so that our system, our design, our code works well and it is good in structure, correct? So if you follow design patterns, you can write code which is more maintainable and most importantly scalable. Okay, so if I talk about design patterns, we base on the upper level, on the higher level, we have three types of design patterns. First is creational patterns, okay, and then we have structural, and at the last we have behavioral. So these are the three categories that I can say we have in design patterns. Now let's first understand what's the difference between these three categories, like why are they even categorized, right? Now if we talk about creational, as the name says, creational basically provides a pattern. Like if I talk about creational design patterns, these patterns provide various object creation mechanism. Basically tells you how to create an object. Like if we talk about OOPS programming language, correct? How are we making object? We just say that new object, correct? So that is like simple thing. But if you follow the creational design patterns, there are so many types on how we can create objects, and we'll be discussing what are the best practices to create an object and which design pattern to use when. Okay, so creational basically gives you a mechanism when how to create object. Okay, then we have structural. Structural basically explains you how to assemble the objects. First step was creational, so we use some design patterns to create objects. Then we use structure to basically put that objects together in a structure, I can say. And then at the end we have behavioral patterns. So these patterns are concerned with algorithms and assignment of responsibilities, like how these objects will be behaving. Okay, so like first step was to create your house, correct? So once your house is created, you basically structure it, and then behavioral, that means installation of wires and that, like just a pretty basic example so that okay, let me give you an example. Let's start with first creational. Okay, so creational design pattern. Okay, just understand this problem very carefully. Let's say you have a class database. Okay, no problem in that. Now obviously you have a database here, right? So this class basically helps you in connecting and like communicating with this database. So this is a DB. Maybe it is running on AWS or any cloud, which is okay. Now as soon as you create an object of this database class, basically the constructor, what this constructor does is basically makes a connection with the database, which is perfectly fine. And then you have some methods such as query the command, get the data, put the data, and all that stuff. Now do you see any problem here? Like a database class in which the constructor makes a connection with the DB. You'll say, hey, that's all right, where's the problem? So the problem is, what if I make 1000 objects, okay, 1000 objects of this class? So what will happen? We'll end up making 1000 connections with database, correct? And if you have worked with databases, you know that we have to pay for per connection. So making up 1,000 connections can increase your cost and can gradually increase your bill. So it's not a good thing, right? Like anytime I make an object, a connection is made. Why can't I use a pre-existing connection? Correct? Use the pre-existing connection and do the stuff. Why are we making objects and having an open connection every time? So to solve this particular problem, we have a design pattern known as Singleton. Okay. So the name of this pattern is Singleton. Now, if you read the name Singleton, you already know what it does. It basically enforces you to create only and only one object of a class. Okay. How we are going to achieve it? Let's see that in code. Okay. So you know that we are now talking about a creational design pattern, and first pattern that we are taking is Singleton. Okay, so let's see Singleton in action. So this is a simple boilerplate code. Okay, so as we have taken an example, let's say I have a class database service. Okay, so this is the class that helps me to create connections with the database. Now, as I told you, we'll be having a constructor, right? A constructor, and what this constructor do basically opens a connection. So open a connection, okay, with DB. So anytime I make a connection or anytime I make an object of this database service, a connection will be opened. Let's have a couple of more dummy methods. Let's say I have public void get data from tables, like database basically. Okay, so we have this method. These are just dummy methods to elaborate you. Let's say we have a data to put data in database. Okay, so this is a dummy method again. So like we have these methods, okay, a data, put data in database. Yeah, so we have a class which basically makes a connection to the database, and then I can use these functions to do the things. Now as a normal user, what we'll do, we'll say database service, let's say DB equals to new database service, which is fine. Then I can say, hey DB, go ahead and get data for me, and then hey DB, go ahead and put the data for me. Now if I run this code, what will happen? As expected, opens a connection. So we have one connection. What if I duplicate this line? Okay, let's say I have again made an object. Then I can let me do one thing. I will reassign the variable. So I'll say new database service. Let's do it once more, equals to new database service. So basically I'm just reinitializing them. Now if I run this code, so you have opened 3 connections with the database service, correct? Which is like, at this point your cost will start increasing. Now how to prevent these things? Okay, now see very carefully what I will do. First of all, I don't want that user can create object of this class. Okay, first of all, discourage the user from creating an object. So what I will do, just making the constructor private will basically discourage the user from creating an object, because if a class is having a constructor which is marked as private, you cannot create object of that class. Okay, this is okay, but hey Piyush, this is not the solution, right? You just discourage the user from creating an object, and now he can't even do anything with the database. If you run this code, you'll get an error that you cannot create, like you can see the error, database service has private access in database service. So how we are going to solve this problem? Okay, I said, see what I will do, just look at this carefully. I will make a private variable, okay, which is of type database service, that is this class itself, and I will name it as instance. Okay, instance. Okay, great. Now as you can see that this particular thing is private, which is okay, and private methods and variables are accessible inside the class, which is correct. Now what I will do, let's make it static as well. So private static. Okay, so this is a static variable instance. Now see what I'm going to do. I will say public static get instance. Okay, basically I'm making a getter for this, basically a getter for this instance. Now see what I will do, and yeah, data type, don't forget the data type, and the data type will be database service itself. Now first time this instance is going to be null, correct? So what I will do, I'll say that if instance is null, okay, just initialize the instance. So I can say is equals to new database service. basically what I did, the thing that I'm doing here, I have moved this thing inside this function. Now why am I able to make a object in this particular function? Because this function is inside the class, and private methods, or I can say private constructors, methods and variables are accessible inside the class. So can I do this? Yes. And then just do one thing, then just return the instance. Okay. Now see what will happen. Can I create an object? Obviously not. But what I can do is I can say database service dot get instance, which basically means the same thing, because this particular static function will make the instance for me. Now I can say db.get data from tables and put the data from tables. If I run this code, you see that we have opened one connection. Let's try to do that thing again. So I will say db equals to database service dot get instance. Let's do it again. db equals to database service dot get instance. So technically, if I didn't implement the singleton thing, there should be 3 open connections, correct? But because we have done the we have done the singleton thing, so now you can see that we are only and only opening the connection once. Okay, let's understand again what we did. And just to prove my point, let's s out something here. S out putting data in db, and let's say s out getting data from db. Okay, if I run this code, you can see that yes, our operations are going well, but our connection is only opened once. Okay, so what's happening is, see what I did. Let's understand it on the board. It will be easier for you as well. We have a class. Okay, the class is db service, so this is a class. Okay, now first step was disable the user. Okay, disable the user to create object, because I don't want that user should be able to create an object, right? Because if I give the ability to create objects to the user will just go on and creating the objects. Okay, so now how to do this? Just make the constructor private. Now just by making the constructor private, what you did is basically you blocked the access. Okay, you blocked the access for the user to create an object. Okay, but now the second problem is that if you can't create an object of the class, then what's the need? So what I did, I basically made a static variable which is named as instance. Okay, and the type of this instance is basically database service, which is fine. Now whenever you call this get instance, the very first time, that is on this particular line, when this line calls this particular get instance function, this instance will be null. So I say that if the instance is null, just do one thing, create a new instance. Okay, so I'm creating a new instance, basically creating a new object. You can treat this as object. So this is an object. Okay, so I can say that if the object is null, create an object and return that object. Okay, so first time when you basically first call this function, an object will be created. Now why am I able to create objects inside the class? Because the private methods or private constructors are accessible inside the class. So I was able to make an object and I returned this object. So this basically opened a connection with db, which is perfectly fine. Now next time, the game changes here. Next time when I again call this function database service.get instance, this function will be called, and this time object is not null. Okay, because in the previous call we have already made an object. Now this object is no longer null, correct? So this if will be skipped. Okay, so these both of the lines will be skipped, and only this return object will execute, thus returning the same instance, or I can say same object from the previous call to your function. So using this particular singleton design pattern, you can discourage the user from creating more than one object. So in this particular design pattern, a user can only and only create one object of a class. So this was all about singleton design pattern. I hope that singleton is clear to you. And that's it for this video. Let's meet you in the next video. Until then, bye bye, take care.